Harlem, 1934. 3:17 in the morning. Bumpy Johnson stood in the doorway of Stephanie St. Clair's mansion, his heart hammering against his ribs like a prisoner trying to break free. The door hung open, swaying slightly in the October wind. Inside, silence. The kind of silence that screams. The Queen of Numbers had vanished into the night, and with her, the fragile piece that held Harlem together by a thread. On the mahogany table in the parlor, illuminated by a single lamp that someone had left burning, lay a note. The paper was expensive, cream-colored, the kind that wealthy white men used for business correspondence. But the message written across it was anything but businesslike. The ink was fresh, still glistening slightly, and mixed with something darker. Blood. Not much, just enough to send a message. $100,000 and complete control of the numbers racket. 6 hours, or Stephanie St. Clair would be executed. It was 3 in the morning. At 9, the woman who had built an empire from nothing would die like a dog in some abandoned warehouse. Bumpy's hands trembled as he held the note, and for a moment, just a brief flickering moment, he felt something he rarely allowed himself to feel. Fear. Not for himself. Never for himself. But for her. Stephanie St. Clair was not just his employer. She was not just the boss who signed his checks and gave him orders. She was the woman who had found him 10 years earlier, bleeding in an alley after a knife fight that should have killed him. She was the one who had taken him to a doctor, paid for his stitches, and then looked him dead in the eye and said something no one else had ever said to him. "I see what you could become." She had given him purpose when he had nothing but rage. She had given him direction when he was just another angry young man with fists and no future. She was family, the only family that mattered. And now someone had taken her, and Bumpy Johnson felt a cold fury settling into his bones like winter frost. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand who Stephanie St. Clair was. Born in Martinica in 1897, she had arrived in Harlem in 1912 with nothing but a cloth bag, $20, and a will that could bend steel. By 1934, she controlled the largest illegal lottery operation on the entire East Coast. The numbers game was everything in Harlem. It was hope wrapped in a dollar bill. It was the dream that tomorrow might be different. And Stephanie did not just run the game. She protected it. She protected the people who played it. She protected Harlem itself. When the Italian mafia tried to muscle in on her territory, she refused to back down. When Dutch Schultz, the most feared gangster in New York, threatened small business owners who worked with her, she walked into his office alone and told him to his face that he could go to hell. Stephanie St. Clair was a black woman in a world run by white men and organized crime, and she had made kings bow. She was untouchable, a legend, until tonight. Bumpy moved through the mansion like a ghost, his eyes scanning every surface, every corner, searching for clues that others would miss. There were no signs of struggle, no overturned furniture, no broken glass, no screams that neighbors would have heard. Professionals had done this, the kind of professionals who knew how to move through shadows without disturbing them. He climbed the stairs to the second floor, to Stephanie's bedroom. The window was open. The lock was intact. No scratches on the wood, no forced entry. They had come in like smoke, silent and deadly. Stephanie had been taken while she slept, probably with a cloth soaked in chloroform pressed against her face before she could even open her eyes. No chance to fight, no chance to scream. Just darkness, and then waking up in some cold room with ropes around her wrists. But they had left something behind. Bumpy crouched by the windowsill, his fingers tracing the wood. There, caught on a splinter, fibers, wool, Irish wool, the expensive kind that dock workers wore in the winter, and on the floor, half hidden under the curtain, a cigar. Cuban, still fragrant. Someone had been nervous smoking while they waited for their moment, and there, in the dust on the window ledge, a boot print. Partial, but clear enough. The sole had a distinctive pattern, the kind that only came from one manufacturer, McGrath and Sons. They made boots exclusively for the longshoremen who worked the Hudson River docks. Irish longshoremen. These were not Italians. These were not Dutch Schultz's men. These were Irish, and that changed everything. The gears in Bumpy's mind began to turn, clicking into place like the mechanisms of a lock being picked. The Irish had been trying to break into the numbers racket for months. They were led by Jack Diamond, called Legs, because of how fast he could run when the police came. Legs Diamond was a killer, a psychopath wrapped in expensive suits and charm. He was a rival of Dutch Schultz, hated him with a passion that bordered on religious fervor. But why kidnap Stephanie? Why not just kill her? Why the ransom note? If you're enjoying it, click the subscribe button and support our work. It helps us a lot. And then it hit Bumpy like a fist to the gut, and he understood the entire play. It was not about money. It was about war. If Dutch Schultz paid the ransom, he would look weak to every gangster in New York. If he did not pay, Stephanie would die, and everyone would blame him. Either way, Dutch and Bumpy would go to war. Harlem would burn. Blood would flow in the streets. And in the chaos, in the violence and confusion, the Irish would move in and take everything. It was brilliant. It was monstrous. And it was about to fail. Bumpy had 6 hours. He looked at his watch, 3:37. By 9 o'clock, Stephanie would be dead unless he did something. But what could he do? He could not call the police. Half the cops in Harlem were on Legs Diamond's payroll. They would warn him, and Stephanie would die before Bumpy got close. He could not gather an army of men and storm wherever they were holding her. There was no time to organize that kind of operation. And even if there were, the moment they saw armed men coming, they would put a bullet in Stephanie's head. He could not negotiate. Legs Diamond was not interested in negotiation. He wanted blood. He wanted chaos. So Bumpy did something that no one expected. He did not reach for his gun. He reached for the telephone. Mouse answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. Mouse was Bumpy's eyes and ears on the waterfront, a nervous little man with a gift for hearing things that were not meant to be heard. "I need information," Bumpy said, his voice cold and level. "Legs Diamond, where does he take people when he wants them to disappear? I have 5 hours." There was a pause. Mouse understood what was being asked. "Give me time," he said. "I'll call you back." 40 minutes later, the phone rang. "Abandoned speakeasy in the Bronx," Mouse said rapidly. 147 Webster Avenue. Used to be an Irish meeting spot during Prohibition. Nobody uses it anymore, but I saw movement there last night. Trucks, men, could be nothing, could be everything. Bumpy hung up without saying thank you. There was no time for courtesy. There was only action. He drove to the Bronx through empty streets, the city still sleeping, unaware that in a few hours, everything might change. He arrived at Webster Avenue at 5:33 in the morning. The speakeasy looked dead. The windows were boarded up. The door was padlocked. But in the alley behind the building there was a car, a black Cadillac with the engine still warm, and light, faint orange light leaking through cracks in the covered windows. And sounds, male voices, laughter, the laughter of men who thought they had already won. Bumpy settled into a doorway across the street and watched. He was good at watching. He had learned patience in prison, learned that sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do was move too fast. For 30 minutes, he observed. He counted 5 men. He recognized Legs Diamond immediately. The man was vain, always wore expensive clothes even when he was committing crimes. There was a scar on his left cheek, a gift from a rival who had not lived long enough to regret giving it. 4 other men, big men, enforcers, muscle. They carried Thompson's submachine guns, leaning the weapons against the wall like they were broomsticks. If Bumpy went in shooting, everyone would die, including Stephanie. That was not acceptable. He needed a different strategy. He needed to think. And then he saw it. A delivery truck pulled up to the side door. The driver got out, opened the back, and began unloading barrels. Beer barrels, 3 of them, heavy. The driver was sweating despite the cold morning air. One of the Irish gangsters opened the door, inspected the barrels, nodded, and helped carry them inside. The Irish were drinking. They were celebrating their victory before it had even happened. And in that moment, Bumpy Johnson saw the entire solution to his problem laid out before him like a map. He followed the delivery truck when it left. The driver stopped at a small diner 3 blocks away, went inside for coffee. Bumpy approached the truck, tapped on the driver's window. The man jumped, startled. $50, Bumpy said quietly. If you let me add something special to those barrels before your next delivery. The driver was young, maybe 25, with the tired eyes of someone who worked too many hours for too little money. He looked at Bumpy, then at the $50 bill in Bumpy's hand. $50 was 2 weeks' wages. What kind of something? He asked cautiously. The kind that makes bad men go to sleep, Bumpy said, permanently. The driver's eyes widened. I don't want trouble, he said. $100, Bumpy corrected. The driver took the money. Bumpy drove back to Harlem, straight to Chinatown, to a small pharmacy on Mott Street. Dr. Chen was old, maybe 70, with hands that still moved with surgical precision. He owed Bumpy a favor from years back, when Bumpy had protected his shop from extortionists. I need strychnine, Bumpy said without preamble. Enough to kill 5 men, but it needs to take at least 2 hours to work. I need them to drink it and not feel anything until later. Dr. Chen looked at Bumpy for a long moment. Strychnine is painful, he said softly. Very painful. Convulsions. Suffocation. The body turns against itself. They will die in agony. Bumpy did not blink. They kidnapped Stephanie St. Clair, he said. Dr. Chen's expression changed. Everyone in Chinatown knew Stephanie. She had protected them too. Then they deserve pain, Dr. Chen said quietly. He went into the back room and returned with 3 small glass vials. This will do what you need. But Bumpy, once you do this, there is no going back. Bumpy took the vials. There was no going back the moment they touched her, he said. At 7:15, Bumpy intercepted the delivery truck again, this time in a deserted alley. The driver helped him open the barrels without asking questions. Smart man. Bumpy poured the contents of all 3 vials into the beer, stirred it carefully with a long stick. The strychnine was colorless, odorless, tasteless. It would dissolve completely into the alcohol. Perfect. Deliver these like nothing happened, Bumpy told the driver. And if anyone asks, you never saw me. You never talked to me. I'm a ghost. The driver nodded rapidly and drove away. Bumpy watched the truck disappear around the corner. It was done now. The poison was in motion. All that remained was waiting. At 7:45, the delivery truck arrived at the speakeasy. Bumpy watched from his hiding spot across the street as the Irish gangsters unloaded the barrels, laughing and joking. Legs Diamond slapped the top of one barrel with his palm, the sound echoing in the quiet morning. Boys, he called out, let's drink to our success. At 9 o'clock, we're going to own Harlem. We're going to be kings. The other men cheered. They rolled the barrels inside. The door closed. And Bumpy waited. This was the hardest part, the waiting, the not knowing. The strychnine needed time to work. It would not kill immediately. That was the point. If they died right after drinking, someone might get suspicious, might warn others. But if they drank now, felt fine for an hour or 2, they would never connect their deaths to the beer. They would think it was poison from somewhere else, some other source. They would die confused. Bumpy lit a cigarette, his hand steady despite the racing of his heart. Every minute was an eternity. Every second Stephanie was closer to 9 o'clock, closer to execution. But he could not move yet. Not yet. He had to trust the poison. He had to trust Dr. Chen's expertise. He had to wait. At 8:28, he heard the first scream. It came from inside the speakeasy, muffled by walls but unmistakable. A man in agony. Then another scream. Then a crash, like a body hitting the floor. Bumpy dropped his cigarette, crushed it under his heel. It was time. He crossed the street calm and unhurried. The side door was unlocked. He pushed it open slowly. The smell hit him first. Vomit, sweat, fear. The smell of men dying badly. The scene inside was something out of a nightmare. 3 men were on the floor, their bodies jerking in violent convulsions. Foam poured from their mouths. Their eyes were rolled back in their heads. A fourth man was on his knees, vomiting blood onto the wooden floor, his hands clawing at his throat like he was trying to tear it open to get air. And Legs Diamond was slumped against the wall, his expensive suit soaked with sweat, his face pale as death itself. He was still alive, but barely. His whole body was shaking. When he saw Bumpy walk through the door, his eyes went wide with recognition, with understanding, with terror. Legs tried to move, tried to reach for the Tommy gun that was leaning against the wall just 2 meters away, but his muscles would not obey. His body was betraying him, shutting down system by system. "You," he managed to whisper, his voice a rasping croak. "What did you do? What did you do to us?" Bumpy walked forward slowly, his face expressionless. He looked down at Legs Diamond like he was looking at garbage. "You touched Stephanie," Bumpy said simply. That was all the explanation necessary. That was all the justification required. "The beer," Legs said, his eyes closing in pain as another wave of convulsions hit him. "You poisoned the beer. You son of a bitch." He fell forward onto his hands and knees, his body shaking violently. Blood dripped from his nose, from his ears. The strychnine was destroying him from the inside. In 3 minutes, he stopped moving. His body gave one final shudder and then went still. All 5 men, dead. Not a single shot fired. Not a single witness. Just poison and patience and perfect execution. Bumpy stepped over the bodies and walked to the back of the speakeasy. There was a door that led to the basement. He opened it and descended the stairs into darkness. At the bottom, tied to a chair with ropes gagged with a strip of cloth, was Stephanie St. Clair. Her eyes found his immediately. There was relief in those eyes, gratitude, tears, but also something else, pride. She had known he would come. She had never doubted it. Bumpy cut the ropes with his knife, removed the gag gently. "I told you I would always come for you," he said quietly. Stephanie stood on shaking legs and threw her arms around him, holding him tight. She was trembling, but not from fear, from rage, from the knowledge of how close she had come to death. "They were going to kill me at 9, she said, her voice hoarse. "They told me Dutch Schultz would never pay the ransom. They wanted you and Dutch to go to war. They wanted Harlem to burn so they could take over." Bumpy nodded. "I know," he said. "But Dutch had nothing to do with this. It was Legs Diamond. And Legs Diamond is dead now. They're all dead." Stephanie pulled back, looked up at him. "How many?" she asked. 5, Bumpy said. "How?" Stephanie asked. Bumpy smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Poison," he said. "They drank to their victory. It became their funeral." 3 hours later, Bumpy sat in the office of Dutch Schultz. The Dutch was a dangerous man, paranoid and violent, but he was also smart. He knew when to fight and when to make peace. He looked at Bumpy with a mixture of respect and fear. "I heard Legs Diamond and his boys died this morning," Dutch said carefully. "Poisoned. Clean work. Professional." Bumpy said nothing. Sometimes silence was the best answer. Dutch leaned back in his chair. "I want you to know I had nothing to do with Stephanie's kidnapping," he said firmly. "Legs was trying to start a war between us. He wanted me to look weak or look guilty. Either way, I lose. You saved me from that war." Bumpy leaned forward, his eyes hard. "Stephanie St. Clair is untouchable," he said. "She always has been. She always will be. Anyone who forgets that ends up like Legs Diamond." Dutch opened his desk drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. He slid it across the desk. Inside were $100,000 in clean bills. "Compensation," Dutch said, "for the disrespect to her name, and my guarantee that no Irish, no Italian, no German will ever touch Stephanie or her operation again. You have my word." Bumpy took the envelope. "Your word is only good as long as Stephanie stays protected," he said quietly. "The day someone tries something against her, your word turns to ash, and you know what I do with ash." Dutch nodded slowly. There was understanding in his eyes, understanding and fear. "We have an agreement," he said. The story spread through Harlem like wildfire. Legs Diamond and 4 of his best men dead. No shots fired, no witnesses, just Bumpy Johnson and his absolute loyalty. Stephanie used the $100,000 to expand her numbers operation, becoming even more powerful than before. And everyone in Harlem learned a lesson that would echo for years. Intelligence is deadlier than any weapon. Loyalty is worth more than gold. And if you touch someone under Bumpy Johnson's protection, you do not die quickly. You die in agony, confused and betrayed by your own celebration. The ghost of Legs Diamond taught that lesson to anyone who needed teaching, and Harlem never forgot. If you enjoyed our content, consider clicking the button. New exclusive stories every day.